Cheers, Tony. Oh, it's a wee bit loud. Hey, Tony, I don't care if you said 7 to 8 minutes or 78 minutes. I kind of like a wee blather than that, but I don't care if I could manage 7 to 8 minutes. It is a great inspiration to see a packed Bonar Hall here with Dundee folk. Definitely led the way in the campaign towards independence. Sadly, it didn't work out for me, but I've got my own views about corruption and all that. I wouldn't have passed them. Anyway, we can't look back, we've got to look forward. But on the night of the 17th, I wrote a poem because I was that confident that we were going to get this victory. And I hadn't even thought about doing a poem that was going to be defeatist, but I said I'll do it anyway. And that was sadly the end that I did read out on the Friday morning. But Tony asked us to do the end, and this will be kept and it'll go public when we do get our independence. It's called Scotland, a Nation Reborn. It's been a long time coming, our years, months and weeks, folk going mental, hysterical and some kicking their brakes. The question of Scotland's future, we a nay or a no, the chance to carry on as sheep or prosper and grow. Well, ken what, you beautiful world, the people voted yes. These ends did anyway. They did what they felt was right, it was done for the best. For the rich to the poor, the great minds and forward thinkers, to the tinkies, grafters, scaffies, minks, posh folk and hardened drinkers. They showed through people power, you could overcome the odds. David kicked Goliath's arse, fair and square at the ballot box. No, he didn't. And now the hard work begins, but I'm sure we'll manage fine. Like the awakening of a newborn bairn, moving forward for Auld Lang Syne. Now feel Scotland's beating heart, see the golden eagle soar, say the words, we are free, hear the lion rampant roar. Cheers. And that will be kept for the day when it comes, and we will be free. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'll pass you back over to Tony. Thanks.
I think it's quite fitting that we actually start this meeting, the Red Yes Big meeting, with a statement of Ori intent, if you like, because we absolutely and utterly are determined that Gary will actually get the opportunity to recite that poem in the aftermath of independence sooner rather than later. But I'd just like to introduce myself and just very, very briefly explain the purpose of this event today. I'm Tony Cox. I'm associated with Stobie for Aye. We're a small local group in the Stobswell area, and we've decided to actually host this meeting. We're not presuming to put ourselves forward in a leadership position role or anything like that, but what we felt it was necessary in the immediate aftermath of the defeat was to attempt to try and draw the forces together in Dundee that had gotten such a great result for this city. Well, this is not this is not a navel-gazing exercise. In my view, this is actually a victory rally, because we got a majority in Dundee on the 18th of September. However, we shouldn't forget the other places. Glasgow, of course, made an absolute stab in the heart to the Labour heartlands in the west coast of Scotland with a marvellous result that they got over there. But it wasn't just Glasgow. There was places like Inverness, places like Kirkcaldy, places even like Oban actually voted yes, and dozens of other towns and villages right across Scotland voted for independence. The purpose behind this meeting today is, as I said, to actually try and draw the forces together. We're on the left, but we're a broad church, to attempt to try and establish a coordinating group. One of the things that was happening in the immediate aftermath of the vote was the proliferation and formation of new groups. And what we are a bit concerned about is that energy is getting dissipated, that we're replicating our roles, and that there's a lot of confusion actually kicking about. It's a great situation to be in, because it's an explosion of grassroots interest. And we want to keep that grassroots interest going. Now, we're going to be putting forward some very modest proposals at this event today. First of all, the participating groups and also other groups that have been formed in the aftermath of the vote, we would invite on to a broad left organising committee. What we are also proposing in terms of concrete action is that we will support, or the participating organisations in this meeting will support an immediate rally and march demonstration on end sanctions now on Friday the 3rd of October from 12 to 2 p.m. Because people might remember when Alex Salmond visited Dundee, during the campaign trail, when he was on the campaign trail, and he actually visited the Stobie Farai Dawes stall, which was actually outside the brew, and we prevailed upon him to actually promise that in the eventuality of independence, that he would move from the stated SNP position, which was to call a review on the issue of sanctions, and actually move towards a position where he would promise that sanctions would end on behalf of the SNP, and he did that. Saying for a while during this campaign that the consequences of a yes vote are wonderful, but the consequences of a no vote would be terrible and awful. We didn't believe that was scaremongering. The precise definition of the word scaremongering is rumours of impending disaster. We didn't, there's no rumours actually kicking about. It's actually coming through the horse's mouth what they're actually going to do. The Tory backbenchers are jumping up and doing about the Barnett formula, and they are coming for what's left of the welfare state. We know that. And a city like Dundee is already in a position where it's barely actually able to function with regards to the social problems that are popping up all the time right across this city. Some of the fellow Dundonians are actually starving. And people that are actually involved with Stobie Farai, a guy that's actually involved with Stobie Farai, Gary, on the 18th of September he lost the country, on the 19th of September he was bloody sanctioned. That is the reality that we're actually getting in this country in the aftermath of a no vote. And we ain't going to stand for it anymore. We've got to stand up on our hind legs, and we've got to say the line is drawn in the sand this far and no further. And I will prevail upon everybody in this hall. I'll prevail upon everybody in this hall to put the word out that we're actually going to have a day of rage on Friday. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It will be a disciplined rage. It will be stewarded by Stobie Farai. But seriously, we have opportunities. We may have been defeated at the ballot box through a massive lie, a massive propaganda campaign of lies and deception and misinformation. And I know that there's issues with regards to the issue of vote rigging. And let me make my position clear on this. I'm not a complete sceptic on this matter. I was at the Dundee count, and I notice all the Facebook messages that are coming through on this issue. But we're aware that Naomi Wolf is moving on this issue, that she's collecting evidence. And what we don't want to happen, because this would be playing right into the hands of the British establishment, is to start navel-gazing and getting apertured about conspiracy theories. At this stage, the vote rigging issue is a legal issue. It becomes a political issue when we have concrete evidence right across the board and verify concrete evidence that there was vote rigging. I'm conscious I've actually been talking for a wee bit longer than I expected to talk. So I think without further ado, I want to hand over to my comrade and very close friend. We've actually been partners for 17, 18 years, and I think this campaign, we thought might draw us together, but at certain points it seems to have almost buckled us. It's not very good for relationships, being involved in very, very intense campaigns. I can only say I'm very, very proud to be standing alongside Sarah Glynn. And in terms of my own work, I don't think it would have been half as effective without the aid and help that I got for Sarah Glynn. So I'd like you to put your hands together for Sarah Glynn for the Scottish Unemployed Workers Network.
So hello, People's Republic of Dundee. So So how many of those talking heads that dominate our TV screens would have predicted that a week after losing the referendum we'd be filling the Bonar Hall? How many would have foreseen last Saturday's demo in the city square with people who'd never before thought of themselves as political, speaking to 1,000 others over the loud hailer? And how many of those who like to dismiss our campaign as mindless and selfish nationalism would have imagined that yes voters would respond to defeat with mass donations to food banks? If anyone's bothering to look out from the Westminster bubble, they might be amazed at the passion and determination of our independence movement, and at how closely it's bound up with the desire for social justice. While Brown and Darling tried to boost people's self-interest and personal fears, we were discussing how independence could bring a fairer, more equal society. We demanded the power to make Scotland a better nation. We hoped that by now we'd be sure of that power and campaigning how best to use it. Instead, we're still campaigning for independence alongside our fight for a better society. But those two campaigns, for liberty and equality, will boost each other. If we win independence this way, alongside and as part of the struggle for social justice, then the nation that we win will have a much greater chance of being that better nation that we all hope for. At the moment, we're being overwhelmed by a confusion of events and umbrella organisations. Should we be out on the streets? Should we be concentrating on immediate and practical help to those most in need? Should we continue to call for independence? Should we be looking at what can be done with the limited powers that we have and that might be conceded by Westminster? I think the answer is yes to all those things, and the key to a successful movement is combining them together. As Secretary of the Scottish Unemployed Workers Network, I've been campaigning against welfare sanctions since well before the referendum began. Mike Taylor will say more about the Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions campaign. The point is that this campaign doesn't just look at immediate needs. It attacks the policies that created the problems in the first place. As a housing academic, I've written the housing paper for Commonweal, which looks at possible housing policies for a better Scotland. The Commonweal papers were written in the hope that we would have the full powers of independence to implement the policies. But as I'm sure Robin McApline will discuss in more detail, there's still scope to do more now. We need to argue and campaign for everything that's possible under devolution. We will point out every instance where Westminster has held us back, while demonstrating Scotland's determination to take a better, fairer path. The Scottish Government can improve lives here and now, and at the same time win more support for the bigger changes that are only possible with independence. Any further powers that the Unionist parties can agree on are likely to be a poisoned chalice, as they will be accompanied by yet more budget cuts. Powers to choose which vital services to cut. Powers to put up Scottish taxes so that the money returned to us from Westminster can be reduced even further. We need to expose the danger of these sort of powers, and we need to organise to resist the budget cuts that we all know are coming. When we protested cuts in the past, our voices were small and easily ignored. Now we have a mass movement, and we need to plan actions that can't be dismissed. Our power and our solidarity is strengthened when we come together to march and rally. We need to plan rallies for the biggest impact and to highlight key issues and demands. So, for example, we should march on the first Saturday after the autumn budget to demonstrate our determination to resist the cuts. We also, of course, need to prepare for the Westminster elections in 2015 and the Scottish elections the year after. We need to discuss the best tactics for promoting independence and also for making sure, because of the strength of our other activities, that independence is the trigger for greater social justice. We hope that we can create a new broad left, pro-independence alliance to take up the causes so long neglected by the red Tories that still dare to call themselves Labour. the original Labour Party was a coming together of different organisations, and I hope that the links that we are making here and the similar links that will be happening in other parts of Scotland will provide the basis for a new alliance. And I hope that we can find time in all this activity to discuss what is most important in our Better Scotland and to look at and learn from progressive movements in other parts of the world. Our movement has given old activists like me a new lease of life and allowed thousands of others to take politics into their own hands. It's a hugely exciting thing to be part of. The last few weeks have been incredibly intense. The last week has been a roller coaster ride. Now we have to consolidate all that we've achieved and begin to build the structures for the next stage. This won't be a quick campaign, and we'll have to work out how to integrate it with the rest of our lives. But comradeship and purpose will see us through. One day we will look back and say, in the words of a very English poet, Wordsworth, looking back at the French Revolution, "Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive."
Just hand over straight to Mike Taylor.
Hello there, folks, can you hear me clear enough? Yeah. Okay. I did say when I was talking at a Stobie for I rally that I prefer to hide behind these desks. I'm not great at standing up and addressing a crowd, but we'll go for it. I minded when I was hearing Brian Cox here talking in Dundee. Good for Brian, and he's here later on, speaking about his Irish ancestry. The vote in Dundee has been described as a red yes vote. It's come to my mind that it was also a green yes vote. I don't think there's no lack of connection between the fact that this city had the highest proportion of Irish people working in the mills in the late 19th century and in the early 20th century, and the vote that took place there. Progressive politics, as some of the historians here can testify, can pass through the generations. Now, as Dundee against welfare sanctions, I'll give you a little history, but it's a bit of a grim history that we've experienced over the last 6 months. We grew out of Dundee against ATOS. There are people in this halls who've had the miserable experience down there at the Green Market of ATOS. Problem with the Green Market is there's barely anybody there. We needed to be amongst the people. So there was an initiative came out of the web there on April the 1st to go along to the brews and to have joint protests against sanctions. Here's our experience. Within hours, minutes really, of setting up the Wellgate Brew, the Wellgate Job Centre, we were hearing grim accounts of the sanctions regime and the consequences of the sanctions regime, which was plain and simply hunger. That word. Why were the Irish here in the first place in the 19th century? Because of hunger, organised or ignored by the British that ruled the country at that time. We met volunteers from the Citizens Advice Bureau who testified, telling us about a 400% increase in referrals for advice and support over the last couple of weeks because of the stepping up, the clear stepping up of the sanctions regime out of the job centre there. We met Christian organisations who were providing food banks. We met Muslim folk who were organising food banks, thereby emphasising and underscoring the fact the consequences of decisions made up the stairs in the Wellgate Brew, whether verbal or written, were people being sent on their way to the food banks. Even the Courier and the Evening Telegraph, and things must be bad for that reactionary crowd to pay attention. Even the Courier and the Telegraph in the last couple of weeks, in the last week of April, were moved to say Tayside families going hungry. And if you make the front page of the Courier and Tully on that basis, there must be something going wrong that merits the campaigning that we've done over the last period. We were able to speak at Dundee's May Day rally. There we were able to link the present crisis for people being sanctioned with significant figures in Dundee and Scotland's past. We make no apology for this. James Connolly, who became a socialist in Dundee and who was executed by the British for his part in his country's struggle for independence, James Connolly wrote a pamphlet in 1899, The Stomach, Not the Brain, in which he emphasised that political movements, political resistance, political organisation grows out of material conditions. And the material conditions we were experiencing at the brew there were that there were thousands of people going hungry. And on that basis, progressive change, on that grim basis, progressive change can be discussed and organised. People were needing an immediate, not just a long-term answer to their situation. And we say, James Connolly, you were right. Week after week at the brew, meeting hundreds of thousands of those sanctioned, and we also met hundreds and thousands of ardent, definite, absolutely committed supporters of yes for independence for Scotland. Is there a connection there? Is there a connection that when we were there at the brew amongst the poorest people in this city, overwhelmingly, they were telling us to vote for independence, and that was their intention. There were no arguments on that basis at the brew. We spoke of Glasgow's John McLean, who finished his last prison sentence in 1922, sentenced, convicted for sedition, for telling the unemployed not to allow themselves or their families to starve. And in this city, we'll have a memorial to Mary Brooksbanks in the Murray Gate there. It doesn't mention the role of Mary Brooksbanks, but she dared the authorities in Dundee to arrest her like they'd arrested John McLean for giving out advice to the unemployed and the hungry that they should not allow themselves to starve. Our protests have continued, of course. We have as many signatures on the petitions and their signatures out there to equal and be more than the thousands of folks sanctioned by the Wellgate Job Centre. We have marched from the tax-dodging shocks of the multinational retail chains. We've marched past the banks that caused the crisis in the first place, and we've gone back to the brew, and that's where we will remain in our campaigning. As the referendum vote neared, we signed up hundreds of people to vote in voter registrations and encouraged and applauded the massive majority who went out and voted yes. As Tony said, Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions spoke to Alex Salmon, asking what would we be saying on the morning of independence to the hungry folks at the job centre. His words, help is on its way. Today, let's ground ourselves. It's absolutely necessary. Ground ourselves there at the brews, with the hungry and the poor looking for a way out of the continuing crisis for themselves and for the system. Let's build the campaign against sanctions, put pressure on the SNP Scottish Government to cover immediately losses from sanctions, just as they covered bedroom tax arrears, and pressure to deliver more powers to allow the barbaric sanctions regime to be ended. Join us on the protest on Friday, 12 o'clock at the Wellgate Brew.
Actually, what we were proposing, right, was to meet at outside Boots at 12, and what we will be doing is actually having a street rally outside Boots, the same kind of street rally that we actually had last Saturday, which was absolutely spectacular, and then march from Boots to the job centre to have a rally there. And we'll be calling on Stuart Hosey to actually join us. I've not heard back from him yet, but I'm sure he will. If he's got any sense, he will anyway. I'd like to hand over to Sarah Hendry now.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks everyone for coming along today. I'm here representing Radical Independence Dundee, and the first thing I'd like to say is well done. Echoing what Sarah said, Dundee's yes city, so well done for that. And well done to all the people who were campaigning with Radical Indie and other groups like Stobby Fry, that got people to register to vote, DAWs as well, and then got them to actually vote for independence. In the parts of Dundee, in the housing schemes, in the areas where people are going to suffer most from the austerity agenda and the downward trending status quo. And well done also for getting up on Friday morning or afternoon, a bit bleary, maybe teary, and dusting yourselves down and getting back to work, and going to the city square on Friday night, and going to the city square on Saturday and Sunday, and going to meetings all week, great big huge meetings, some of them, in order to make it quite clear to Westminster and the establishment politicians that we're not going back in our boxes. Nobody's going back in their box. We're going to continue to get on with building a better Scotland. So I'm going to say just a little bit about Radical Indie's campaign here in Dundee, and then a few words about what might be some ways forward. Radical Indie took a decision, nationally and in local groups, to campaign in the housing schemes and the areas of greatest social need and the areas who are most disenfranchised from political process. And we targeted our limited human resources on these areas, and it worked. And our core activists, many of whom are here, big thanks to you, 6 months, 3 times a week, in the cold and the dark, first of all, slogging it out, actually talking to people. And we focused on canvassing because we figured that the best way to get people engaged, to get them to think, to get them to be willing to change their behaviour, to think about voting, to see it as something they could do, was to actually talk and to actually listen. And we spent a lot of time listening to folk on their doorsteps. And it's been a privilege both to work with those activists and to hear what those people had to say. It was really illuminating. And I think if we look at the vote in some of the other bits of Dundee that weren't for yes, we look at Broughty Ferry, 1 or 2 really bad boxes, I saw one, but generally about 55% no, about the same as the UK, as the Scottish average. Now if we go to Birkhill voted yes. Birkhill voted yes. As far as we can see, that's not the demographic, it's closer to the ferry than the housing schemes. That's because there was a small team of core activists from the SNP in this case, who were out there chapping on doors for months and months, talking and listening, convincing people to change their minds. So we think that that tactic was really effective. So, Radical Independence is going to continue. Radical Independence is a grassroots campaigning organisation. It's not going anywhere. We had a meeting in Dundee on Tuesday. Instead of our usual 12 to 15, we had 73 people in the upstairs of the Borough Coffee House. It was hot. We'll find a bigger venue. Radical Indie will continue to campaign. Nationally, there will be our annual national conference on 22nd of November, somewhere in Glasgow. Venue depending on ticket sales. We expect it to be massive. Tickets go on sale next week. If you want a place, you should sign up quickly. There will also be regional conferences. We think 5 regional conferences, maybe January, February. There's almost certainly going to be one in Dundee. And the local group will also continue to campaign and to organise. A lot of our discussions on Tuesday and a lot of the discussion at National Forum yesterday were around what I would loosely term a twin-track approach. So we'll go on engaging at every possible opportunity, as Sarah said, with all of the political processes that are open to us. And we'll look at political mechanisms, electoral mechanisms, to take our challenges forward. And we'll also have what you might describe as a social track, looking at what communities need and want in the situation that we find ourselves in now. Looking at non-violent direct action, there's plenty going on needing that. Looking at supporting all the campaigning and issue-based groups, whether it's DAWs or Scottish CND, there's a wide range to pick from. And we will also, most importantly, go on listening. So what Radical Independence sees today as is an opportunity to hear from you. What do you want? How do you want to go forward? We had a really good discussion at National Forum yesterday, but we didn't make a lot of decisions that we could have made in a hurry because we don't think it's right. We think it's more important to reflect a bit, to see what people want here, what people want in communities, We're going to go back to the communities we were campaigning in. We're going to re-engage. We're going to thank them for registering, thank them for voting, thank them for having that faith. We're going to try and convince them that it wasn't a waste of time, because that huge number of people that did vote yes, they're a significant chunk of the population. They can be mobilised again, as long as we keep active, keep creative, keep speaking to each other. So Radical India will stay as a mechanism to keep the debate open. Debo Max is unravelling, their lies are exposed, but then we all knew they were all lies anyway. So we'll continue to engage with the political and the non-political processes. We'll see what comes out of today's meeting at a local level, and we still believe that another Scotland is possible.
Working with these microphones. I'm used to a megaphone, I'm just bawling my head off in the street. I feel a bit discombobulated, really. There's one or two points I want to make just before I open it up to discussion in terms of proposals for action. We've already mentioned the DAWS SUWN March and Rally on the 3rd of October. But I believe that the critical point, and we are at a pivotal point in Scottish history indeed, but I think we're actually going to be at a pivotal point as well in about 5 or 6 weeks with what the post-referendum situation is actually going to be in Scotland, because that is when we actually have the budget. And I think on that budget an awful lot will actually hinge. And also we have the whole issue facing the left about what our attitude is towards A, the Labour Party, speaking as an ex-Labour speaking as a Stobie for Aye activist, we've discussed it quite a lot, as you can imagine, and their attitude is no cooperation. And I think that has got to be. There was any big major split in the Scottish left over the referendum issue, because the predominant part of the Scottish left, apart from Raymond Merry, was actually, supporting independence. And we also have the whole issue of what our attitude is going to be towards, for instance, the SNP. Now, over the last few months, we've actually worked quite closely with the SNP, and on the whole, it's been a very pleasurable experience. A stark contrast to attempting to try and work with some of the suits that you actually get in the Labour Party. We believe it is absolutely necessary to keep the broadest possible block or front towards the attacks that are undoubtedly coming. But a lot of it's actually going to hinge on the attitude of the SNP with regards to the attitude they take towards the cuts that are coming. It's just been announced £8 million worth of cuts in Dundee City Council. We'll see what the situation is following the Scottish budget. So we'd be putting forward one of the first things that we believe a broad left organising committee, and it should meet in the aftermath of this from the participating groups in the next few days. What we would be putting forward to Stobie for Aye is the suggestion that we actually have a national demonstration in Dundee on the issue of the cuts in the next month to 2 months. Dundee is the yes city. The point is the red yes city, and we want to invite the rest of Scotland to actually come to Dundee to experience the oriness of our and the diversity of our movement and add their voices to it, as well as us always having to go through to Glasgow for demonstrations. We think it should go the other way around. These are the kind of points that we want to actually discuss, and I'll open up for discussion now. Just as a matter of interest, how many people here have joined the party in the last week since the, my goodness. Just as a matter of interest, how many joined the SNP?
Most of them, yeah.
Congratulations to the SNP. Congratulations to the SNP, but it might be a bit of a problem for them. So I'll open up for discussion now for any contributions. I know that Mark Scott from the group 45, the 45 group, was actually wanting to make a contribution. He's over here? Yeah. We've got the roving microphone, courtesy of Gary Anderson here.
It's coming over, Mark. It's coming over.
Now, Mark is also involved with Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions. He's one of our case study workers. He's been collecting case studies of people who are affected by the benefit sanctions.
Oh, sorry.
I'm used to it. It's Dundee, you know. You've got to be heckled at least once, even for your own side, like, you know. Wouldn't it be Dundee otherwise? No. Carry on, Mark.
No, I wouldn't. So, please bear with me. My voice falters. It's too much chatting, too much talking, too much bloody shouting over about 6 weeks. So, that's why I've got problems with my voice. Unlike these guys, I've actually not had a chance to put a speech together. So what I'll do is I'll share some observations and thoughts with you. See, my voice is gone already. This is terrible. Anyway, my first observation was the day after the referendum. We'd sort of right through to the bitter end, me and a few people in a house. I was going down the road and I noticed that the posters, comfy hardware by the way, the posters and the stickers had been taken off the windows. But the next day, and then Sunday, I noticed something peculiar happening. People were putting them back up. There was posters and stickers. And I've actually noticed another strange thing. People had obviously ripped up their posters and their stickers and that, just with disappointment and that. And I noticed that people were actually writing yes on bits of paper and putting them on their windows. You know, this is absolutely amazing. We were knocked down, but we got up immediately and we said who we are. We are Scottish people and we voted yes. This is the strength and the determination and the courage of the Scottish people. It's Dundee folk, isn't it? That's what we're like. We didn't up and sit down, we didn't up and we'll not be knocked down. We'll get back up and we'll keep fighting. And that's why we're here today, to keep fighting for an independent Scotland that cares for all its people, that uses its wealth and resources so it's all its people can have a life of decency. That's why we're here today, to ensure that continues, that happens, this fight goes on. I'm actually really struggling here with my voice. Come on, it keeps disappearing, it's coming back now. Anyway, I thought about what we were going to do after the referendum. I went and seen a few folk in Arthur on the Saturday. I was a bit annoyed and angry, which I'm sure most of us were, especially after the scenes we'd seen in George Square on the Friday night. It just infuriated me. So I knocked on people's doors and says, what do we do now? Do we just take this land down? Do we roll over meekly on our backs and allow them to do this? The result, most people said to me, no, we stand up and we fight and we continue to fight. The idea behind the Dundee 45 group was to build a grassroots, community-based organisation, knocking on doors, doing street stalls, telling people that this isn't over, we're still here, we're still standing, we're not defeated. Let's build an organisation that reflects the views and the ideas of the people who voted yes. The idea behind it for me was to continue to engage, as many of the speakers have said, with the first-time voters, the people that never ever voted in their life, people like my next door neighbour, 2 young people, kids struggling to survive, she's got a 24-hour-a-week job, gets a little bit of child tax credit. She finds it difficult on a daily basis, but she and her husband came out and voted yes. Just like Mike and that were saying, the amount of people we met outside the job centre when we were doing the registration drives, people that never voted yes, and never voted before, wanted to vote yes. They wanted to see a Scotland that reflected their interests, their views, a Scotland that was actually there for them. A Scotland that cared about them, a Scotland that put its wealth and resources into making sure these people had a decent living, a decent life. These people came out and voted yes, but they would also go along to the town and they'd tell their friends, and their friends would come along to the job centre to register to vote yes. Now that's the kind of Scotland that, well, we can make, because we've got people like that. We've got loads of people like that all over Scotland. There's millions, what, 1.6 million of us? We can make it happen. We can make it happen because of the determination of people like ourselves, like the people who would travel over the other side of the town to register so they can vote yes. This is the kind of Scotland we can make. We can make a Scotland that is for all of us, where all our wealth and resources are used for all of us. For me,
Mark, could you draw your conclusions now?
Sorry?
Could draw your remarks to a conclusion?
Well, for me, it begins in the communities. It begins in the places where the people who voted yes live. In places like St Mary's, Charleston, Kirton, Dreborough. We met great people down in Dreborough. Solid there, solid. We met great people in St Mary's. People from Fenry, Douglas, Whitfield. We're all here today. There's people from other communities of Dundee here today. We can build in our own communities, we can go out and organise in our communities, and we can ensure that maybe in 2 years' time, there's such a large number of us in Scotland that the sound travels all the way down to Westminster. And we say yes, once again, and they can't ignore us this time. Thanks very much.
My name's Connor Beaton, I'm a member of the Scottish Socialist Party here in Dundee. First off, I'd like to thank Tony and Stobie Fry for inviting me to speak here. I had the privilege of speaking a number of times on the referendum campaign. I'm not a great speaker, unfortunately, and one of the last times I spoke was at an event in Buskers, which I'm sure many of you attended, and after I spoke, Stuart Hosey went up and he referred to my performance directly, and he said that I was nervous as hell. And I was, because it is terrifying putting yourself out there and speaking to people. But today I'm less nervous than I was now because of the urgency of the situation. Because I think frankly we have to organise really quickly. We still have an opportunity to live in a free and democratic Scotland. But there can be no complacency. I've heard people saying that if we just wait 10 years, 15 years, we'll sleepwalk into it. That because young people voted yes, we can just wait and it'll just happen if we give it time. I don't believe that for a second. I think you just have to look across the Irish Sea to see how much Britain loves to desperately cling on to a bit of land, and they'll do the same thing here in Scotland if we let them. I also don't think that the right thing to do is just to blindly endorse a vote for the SNP, not least because the general election is 8 months away, and we can't waste 8 months. We have to work hard in those 8 months to persuade people over to our cause. And it's not just the SNP that gave us a 45% vote for yes across the country, or a 57% vote for yes in Dundee. It was the grassroots activists, it was the wider political participation of working class people, and the most important task for us is to keep that participation going, to go out and make sure that we keep speaking to people. And I'm really glad to hear that there's groups like Radical Independence and Stobie for I that are trying to do that. So, while we had the hands up about joining new political parties, and I can't say I'm not invigorated by the many people who have joined political parties recently. It's over 2,500 people have applied to join the Scottish Socialist Party, and thousands more for the SNP and the Greens, and I'm really excited about that. But we can't let our movement break down into insular groups, because we have to go out and talk to people and not just among ourselves. So the reason I'm here is because I've worked alongside SNP and Greens in Yes Scotland, which was a very successful alliance. I think 45% is a great result against everything that was up against us, and I want that to continue. I want a multilateral campaign for independence to continue, and I know that discussions about cross-party and cross-organisation initiatives have begun, but they need to advance really quickly. And frankly, events like this give me a lot of hope in that department. And on the left, we have a collective mission to make sure that our ideals and visions are at the vanguard of that movement, at least so far as its political element goes. Because our goal is a socially just and equal Scotland, and I know that we will fight for that, and we'll keep on fighting until we get it.
We're going to keep things going quickly. It's a pleasure to pass on to Jim McFarlane. Jim's a member of the Socialist Party Scotland, and like myself, a trade unionist for independence. Jim McFarlane.
Hopefully people can hear me without me getting a Sarah back bending over here, but I think for me the big lesson of this whole campaign is, first of all, this vote, this 1.6 million vote for yes, was a vote. It was a vote against austerity, it was a vote against cuts, it was a vote against food banks, and it was a vote against the Tories, and it was a vote for real change. No coincidence that the working class areas of Dundee, Glasgow, North Lanarkshire and Eastern Bartonshire voted yes. No, Western Bartonshire, sorry, they'll be next, Eastern Bartonshire will be next, right? We have suffered, our class has suffered for decades. Decades of job losses, of privatisation, chronic youth unemployment and everything else that goes with that. The hopes of the British state and the British ruling class that after the vote on the 18th of September that everything would go back to normal from their point of view has clearly been blown out of the water, even just by the number of people that have turned up today and have campaigned on the streets since that referendum. Because let's remember, the level of political engagement, the level of political involvement of people who have never voted, of people who have never even registered to vote before is very, very significant. We were up against the longest established ruling class in the world. They had 300 years of history and tradition to prepare for this, and they threw everything at this. They threw everything. Their friends in big business, their friends in the media, and they still just squeezed a vote out of that. So we shouldn't have been disheartened at that. Let's look at their version of normality since the vote. Their version of normality was on the Friday. Their MPs voted for a pay rise of 11% for themselves. Friday passed, their version of normality. We've had 2 wars in Iraq, they went so well, they voted again for another one. That's their version of reality and normality, and it's not ours, and it's not what we stand for. And the people who stuck up your hands earlier saying you've joined the SNP, we want to work with you, I want to work with everybody. But I think there's a number of clear markers on this on a principle basis. For me, first of all, austerity. Austerity is a political choice, it is not an economic necessity. We will take no lectures from the big business politicians. Politicians from the public school boys and all the rest of them. Let's remember, when they meet in the cabinet during the week, that's not a cabinet meeting, that's a school reunion. Okay? And what we're up against, that's what we're up against. Now, my challenge to yourselves who have joined the SNP, and I think with the best of intentions, is this. That I'm a local government worker, I'm a trade unionist. I live and work in this city in one of the most deprived areas like Mark up in Adler. And I say to yourselves who have joined that, let's join the campaign against all austerity. Let's say no to all cuts. Let's stand up to the Tories and stand up to Westminster. I read the Daily Mirror the other day about a young disabled man in Sunderland who killed himself because his benefits had been stopped. In my opinion, the people responsible for that are those in power who set that, and they murdered that man. They murdered that man.
Yes.
And I think that the points that others have made, like Albert and others, about the campaign against welfare sanctions that Michael did, then I give that full support. And I think there's a number of lessons. The lessons here of the bedroom tax campaign. Because let's remember about that. Let's remember that on both sides, Labour and the SNP, first of all, said they were opposed to it, but they felt they couldn't do anything about it. We had the SNP saying we had to wait for independence, and the Labour Party told us we had to wait for a Labour government. But that wasn't good enough. People were suffering from that, and I think the people who were involved in that came, a number of you sitting in here today, and I was starting naming, I won't miss anybody here, but June and Elizabeth, Albert and Ronnie and a number of other people led that campaign and took that to the struggle, and I'm proud that this city, we through that campaign were the first city to adopt a no evictions policy, but that happened because of the campaign, not because of the politicians. If we want to win widespread support for independence, then I think that's key, the issue about the campaign against austerity. So, as I said, if the SNP councillors and MPs and the Scottish Government are prepared to take part in the campaign to say no more cuts, we are not passing on any more cuts, because let's remember what these cuts are for. These cuts are being used on our people, on the working class of this country, to pay for the responsibilities of the bankers and their failure of their system, and no more. My challenge as a local government worker in the trade unions is to say, let's work together on that. If you're prepared to stand up and say no more cuts, then I'm prepared to work with anybody, regardless of what party you're in. And I welcome this discussion that was initiated earlier on about the need for a new party that represents working class people. I think, in my opinion, that's overdue. So again, as a Socialist Party Scotland, we're willing to work with anybody on that, and we think we should be working with some of the best elements of the trade union movement, such as the RMT. Let's remember the RMT are in favour of a new party. The RMT voted and campaigned for a yes vote and everything else like that, so we should be working with them. That doesn't mean to say that we all have to forget about what we disagree on, but there's a lot more of what we do agree on. And that point about what we stand for, I think we can stand a number of, develop a new force on that basis, on just some very basic principles. No more cuts, a decent living wage, no 0-hour contracts, a democratic public ownership of the major industries such as energy, of oil and all the rest of it. It's the scandal that older people are scared to put their heating on in the winter when these companies are making billions of pounds of profit. That should be publicly owned. My final point is this. There's a number of lessons, and we can all continue discussing this, but whatever party wins the general election next year, whatever it is, it's a party that's going to be weak and is going to be crisis ridden. It's managing an economy that's faltering and it is stagnant. But the biggest lesson of this is, see, when the working class of this country get organised and get mobilised, that's what brings real change. That's what can bring not just independence but socialism. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Jim. Please welcome Robin McApline.
Right, I'm going to rattle through this at a crazy pace because I've only got 7 minutes. I just thought, right, I'm just going to have to hold her down our bed down. I want to rattle through what I think we might do, how we might get there, what we might do to get us out of Britain as fast as we can, and do it in a way that creates the best country we can on the way out. So, let me just put it like this as fast as I can. I want to start with 3 caveats. Some of what I say today is already been approved by the Commonweal Board. Go and have a look online. We have an amazing board, about 16 strongest people and most inspiring people that came out of this campaign. We asked them if they'd come on our board and they all said yes. So we've got plans, and I'll talk about some of those. I'll touch on some of those. Some of this is my personal opinion, and things are moving very fast, and that's the second caveat. This is only 10 days out. In strategy terms and planning what next terms, this is a blink of the eye. We have to see how things change, we have to see how things settle down, we have to be clever. So we won this. This is a long game. Some of it's short, some of it's medium and some of it's long, and we have to prepare for all of these and do it right. So with that said, let me start and say what I think we need to do stage by stage. 1, we need to clean out as many of the unionist parties, and in particular the Scottish Labour Party, in the 2015 I do not dislike or hate the members of the Labour Party, but I hate what that party has become. It is a function of the British establishment, and in my opinion it has now got to a point where it is the biggest barrier to social change in Scotland. I believe the best way to do do that is to try to pull together for 2015 an electoral alliance. There are still some parts of Scotland where the SNP cannot reach, particularly some of the urban areas. A lot of people talk about Glasgow, but this is also true of Fife, parts of Lanarkshire and others. I would propose that first of all we try to create a really strong manifesto for 2015. That manifesto would, and incidentally I'm going to keep coming back to this point, we cannot revert to being protest and against. The strength of Yes was that we were creating something positive and new. So I don't want to... 7 minutes, folks, stop clapping! So it's not just anti-austerity. I would like to see us put together a fast policy paper which calls for a one-off wealth tax for people, which would largely hit London, which would eradicate all or most of the debt and would make no need for austerity to be there in the first place. If we could create that manifesto and we could create an electoral alliance, perhaps we stand as, I don't know, People's Scotland, and it would say People's Scotland and then a name brackets SNP and a name brackets Scottish Greens. And what we do is we go constituency by constituency across this country, find out who can beat the unionist and stand that person. And if there isn't a party person that can do it, we find an independent that can do it. And we stand an independent in that seat on the same platform, whoever can win. And we pitch that fight as the chance for Scotland to hold Britain to account, which is to say, it is likely that it will be either a tiny minority government or a tiny majority government, more likely to be a minority. It is realistic that we could send 30 or 40 anti-austerity, pro-ending the debt politicians to London that would form the balance of power. And that pitch to the people of Scotland would be an amazingly strong pitch. I wouldn't want to be Labour standing against that when they're standing as pro-austerity. And just for a bit of fun, once we get there, we're actually running the show, we'll turn and say, hey, all you celebs in London, this is what union looks like. We're running the show now. That's just for fun. Okay, so we do that, we get that in, and we start working now, and this is Commonweal. I spent most of the campaign not promoting Commonweal because I never wanted to use this independence campaign as a recruiting tool for anything, or bluntly to sully it by using it to gather money. But we need money now. Someone is going to have to set a policy agenda. I want to see an end to as many of these things as we can, but we do not currently have a straightforward method of ending the sorts of problems with sanctions that you're talking about. We are facing cuts, our budget is being cut. We'll look at packages that can do things about this. A national land value tax and a number of other things can take the pain out of this, but we've got to be realistic. We cannot go out there and say that we in Scotland with devolved powers can end the pain of sanctions, because we can't. So we've got to do a couple of things. We will work hard to get to, by spring, create as positive a manifesto for devolution as we can, which will do as many of the good things. I've written a little bit about them. I can't talk about them just now, but there's amazing things that we could do. For example, a major banking system. We could change the banking system. Every local authority in Scotland could set up a mutual bank which isn't screwing over its customers. We could do things with energy. And we can certainly do things to the budget to take the worst of the pain out of the cuts. We will work very hard to create as powerful and serious a manifesto as we can for the spring of next year. And what we will do is encourage, as far as we can, those floods of you who have joined the political parties to tell those political parties that that's what you want. Remember, the SNP is a democratic party. If enough of you say this manifesto is what we want, you can vote it at conference, and that's SNP policy. Use your strength to change the parties. This is not, and I can promise you, because I talk to a lot of people in the SNP, this is not something which would be unwelcome by many, many people in the SNP. The idea that the SNP was full of right-wingers beforehand is not true. Most of them were, the members of the SNP were good social democrats like the rest of you. And then what we do is we get into a position where we run the same strategy in 2016, seat by seat on the constituency, find the candidate that can win and do it again, and then split on the list, because that's our strength. On the list we can all compete against each other and maximise our vote. So clean them out in the constituency, maximise our vote in the list, and get a parliament which is an elected minority government of people standing on one manifesto if we can possibly do it. And that manifesto has a purpose. Push the boundaries of the powers of independence and push it hard, because that's the mistake one of the mistakes the SNP made, in my opinion, in the last 4 years was don't rock the boat, and softly, softly did not set the case for why we needed more powers. So let's show the limitation of the powers by pushing as hard as we can with a manifesto at those powers. Now, really quickly, another thing that we need to do is accept that the way that the case was put together for independence this time around was not optimal. We had a situation where there was not a really good shared vision for how we create that independence when we launched the campaign, and it came out in dribs and drabs as we went through with various commissions and things. That's not good enough. We need to create a proper case, like the Constitutional Convention did. So I suggest we spend the next 3 years, again, Commonweal doing a lot of work on this, building a really good case. So I think, for example, if you talked around this movement and you hadn't been so scared of the bankers, I suspect we would have made a case for a Scottish currency from kick-off, and if that case had been put together properly, I think it would have been more persuasive. By 2017, we put that full case on the table. Oh, incidentally, I should have said, in my opinion, at the moment, 10 days out, I remind you, I think it's probably likely that we will get the best outcome if we go into 2016 and say we are pro-independence, but we will not call for a referendum the next 4 years with a plan, which is 2017. We put out that big plan for what independence could be if we get it all right. We used the last 3 years of that Parliament to run what is in effect a low-level independence campaign. We get the coalition back together in 2020. By that point, we have actually created the majority, and we stand on a full ticket of early referendum. May election, September referendum, and out by Christmas 2020. That is a model that I think we should be looking at. We've been using all the powers of government and the movement to get us there. If we do that, and if we build that momentum, I think by the time we come to that vote, we'll already be there. I think the actions of Westminster will take us a long way there, but this is all about us now. This is all about us recognising that what made us strong in this campaign was accepting each other's minor differences. The Greens feel differently about oil than perhaps the Socialists do. The Socialists feel slightly different about banking than maybe not so slightly, but the SNP does. The SNP, you need to fix that banking stuff, you need to fix that corporation stuff. Energy, banking was the big mistakes in the policy agenda. So we need to do that, we need to build this up, and I really do think that we can create a coalition that can do these things. And finally, we need to think also about this movement, and this is where Commonweal comes in. We're going to do two things. Well, we're going to do more than two things, but we're certainly going to create a powerful policy unit. It's its own director, its own team, and we're going to work to drive the policy agenda in Scotland as far as we can. The other thing that we are going to do is recognise my biggest learning point of this whole campaign, which is the centre does not control effectively when you have a movement like this. I came from an older school of political strategy where discipline mattered, and I've been taught a lesson by you. We need to find a way to structure this movement which makes it effective but also diverse and able to do its own thing. Now we're going to do a couple of things on that. One of them is we are going to create space. So we've already got a subcommittee that's looking for a large cafe bar in central Glasgow, which we can create as a space for people to come together, meet, talk, organise, get resources and actually work. Now we want, once we've done that, we want to say to people, replicate it. So you lot, you want a space like that in Dundee, we're going to call it the Common. So create the Common Glasgow, the Common Dundee, the Common Inverness, Helsteeth, the Common anywhere, a village, anywhere enough people want to keep it together. We'll help make it look good, we'll network it, we'll give resources, make centres and spaces where it's normal for people who want to care about politics to get together. So we're going to do that, and finally, the other big thing that we're going to work on is creating the infrastructure that changes everything. Common space, we're calling it. This is a powerful, we're already working in this, it's a powerful social media engine. At its heart, it will be like, a Facebook for this movement. And what we can do is follow who we want. So there'll be groups and organisations in there, whether it's Scottish CND or any of the organisations that I've spoken today. Or you can create groups. And anything, and it doesn't just, the point of the strength of this movement is not just a single movement for independence. So perhaps you want to save, I don't know, the whales in the bloody river. If you want to do that, get together, shout out who else feels the same, build a group, work, grow it. You'll have access to our policy unit if you need it. You'll have access to our graphic designer, our writing team, our political lobbies, if that helps. But mainly it's about you creating a self-organised way to sustain, keep organising and build at a national level. And into it we're going to plug, and this is our contribution, we're going to plug an enormous amount of content. We need to change the media. Now there's a million media suggestions out there just now. Far too many, we need to see how they settle down. But in this we will have a section which is news. We will either point to the best independent news that's created, or if nobody else creates that news, we'll start to raise money to employ journalists and we will write a digital news service. We're going to put on there a policy comment, a policy section. You can debate and get involved in networks to influence the policy discussions that we are having through the policy unit. We'll put on there a television channel. This was me summing up. We'll put on there a television channel. We'll start to produce podcasts of audio and video to challenge what we're getting from from the television. We need to create this infrastructure for everything, and all I'm going to say at the end of this is we are itching to do this, desperate to do this. Everyone we talk to is desperate to do this. We have no money. We launched a fundraising appeal today. Like everything else in this movement, it's thousands of people giving small regular donations that makes this real. You want a new media, you want a new policy agenda, you want a new way for this movement to organise, connect, work together, you want spaces that we can go to, £5 a month, £10 a month if you can give it. allofusfirst.org, go on and you'll see, you can click it, there's a video which will tell you a bit more about this stuff as well. So, to conclude, there are a whole range of things we need to do. We need to work with the parties on the grassroots, we need to change the institutions of Scotland, we need to find ways to physically connect and online connect, we need to build, we need to focus, we need to be realistic and positive, we need to work, and we need to work well. We all want to, we know we can do it. Commonweal is a part of that, and we will do everything that we can with your support to make it reality, out by Christmas 2020.
Well, it's been a hell of a time for all of us. I never thought that I'd ever bring myself to this point. I never thought that I'd be sitting here today talking about politics. That wasn't my intention when I was a wee boy. My intention was to get as far away from this country as possible. And the irony is that I've come back, and I am extraordinarily proud to have come back. And I am particularly proud of our city. Our city has been tremendous. We are the Yes City of Scotland. And as the Yes City of Scotland, we have showed a tremendous example. People are looking to us from now on to see what's going to happen. And really, we've got a lot of responsibility. And it's a big responsibility, because it means keeping the head. It means not keeping your eye off the ball. It means delivering what we need to deliver. But at the same time, we've got to avoid the paranoia, which will naturally spring up. Because the truth is that we have truth on our side. We have right on our side. And that's what serves us. And you cannot get away from the truth. Now, that was what's so clear to me when the three amigos arrived with various shenanigans, and I realised it was so obvious, it's so clear, it's like as clear as water that we did have the truth on our side, and it's still on our side. Now, the future is what is important. There's a movement, and this movement isn't going to stop, and it's a movement that encompasses not just the SNP, but also yes for business, yes for academics, yes for artists, independence for women. They're all part of this group. And this group is what's going to continue to change the face of Scotland. And also, more importantly, change the face of Westminster. Because we need to change the face of Westminster. Whether we like it or not, we have voted, not me, not you, not anybody in this room, that the vote has gone to continue the union. But the union will change, and it needs to change. It's rotten to the core. It really is. And the only thing that will save it under the present circumstances is a move to some kind of federation. Because also we owe it to our English brothers and sisters. We owe it to those people in Hull, those people in Leeds, those people in Liverpool, those people in Rotherham, those people in Doncaster, who are fair game for UKIP, people who are so disillusioned with the Labour Party. And there's another crisis coming which we haven't yet seen, which is going to put working man against working man. And that's what we've got to hold on to. We've got to hold on to avoiding that. And we hold on to avoiding that by keeping the faith and keeping the truth and being clear. No anger, no rage, just telling the truth all the way through. And I believe we can do it. I believe our city can do it. Our city is a beacon. 57%. Glasgow, only 54%. But never mind, you know, they'll learn. And that's, to me, was incredible. And I just think it's the beginning. I think we're in such a good state now. But we have to be positive. We have to be grateful. We have to be grateful for the Yes Bus. We have to be grateful for everything. Hi for Stobby. We've got to be grateful for all that's going on, and we have to stop things like this incredible hell of a welfare sanction that's being going on. We've really got to nip that in the bud. There are still things to be done, but at the same time, we have to keep our eye on the ball and saying that's where we're going, and we're going to get there. There's a general election coming, and I want to see every Labour MP turned out of Scotland. Yay! Every single one! Thank you.
But I think this has been a wonderful event. It could have been twice as long, we still wouldn't have got through the business that we actually have today. This is only a beginning. We're scratching the surface. There might be folk here who are frustrated because their voices haven't been heard, or the issues that they want to actually discuss and that they're passionate about actually haven't been addressed as fully maybe as they want to. But this is the early days of the Scottish Revolution. Every single person in here, and every SNP member, however moderate, might even be Tavern Tories, they're revolutionaries as well. They're standing against the British state. And look at what we were actually able to achieve over the course of the last few weeks. The entire British establishment was panicking. Now, the campaign, the way it went in Dundee in the last few weeks was quite interesting as well. I remember the old Eggate scandal, but what just preceded the Eggate scandal was Jim Murphy getting chased out of Dundee. I mean, part of us were thinking, I bet he'd just put somebody up to that so he could just call a halt to the entire escapade because he was finished off in Dundee and he didn't want to continue. But we actually, in Stobie for Aye, we sent a letter to Jim Murphy actually requesting that he actually debate with us in the Stobswell area and that we would actually guarantee his safety and the fact that he would actually be allowed to speak. And needless to say, we never ever heard anything back from him, which I think is a bit churlish on his part. But the entire British establishment at that period of time was actually panicking. And I think Jim Murphy and the whole escapade around Jim Murphy actually totally and utterly underlined that. In the wake of the Jim Murphy episode, we actually received a bit of criticism. You know, getting out in the street and shouting at folk, you shouldn't be doing that. And the point I made is, for Christ's sake, get a bit of a grip, get a bit of a handle on reality here. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look what's happening in Syria. Folk are getting their heats chopped off. You know, somebody shouts at Jim Murphy and all the civilization's bloody imploded. You know, what was all that about? But we've also received some criticism from within the Yes movement for that. Oh, it's a bit dodgy. You know, the fundamental fact of the matter is this, is that our campaign was made through bringing the anger out of the schemes and onto the streets and bringing it right into the city centre. No apology for shouting at Jim Murphy. You know, really, absolutely not. I'd prefer to debate with him in a civilised manner, but that opportunity was not given to us because Jim Murphy moved into our square, used the ambassadors to get our stall off, and then started complaining about folk shouting at him and about freedom of speech. This is the way that the British establishment operate. We know that we're in a battle. We've seen the way in which the British establishment actually reacted to us. And we make no apologies for the perceived militancy of the message that we were actually putting forward. Because my belief is this, is that in the last 2 or 3 weeks of this campaign, in the run-up to the end of the registration drive on September the 2nd, that's when this campaign came alive. Because we were outside the brew, we were out of the city like a rash, attempting to try and register their people. 7,000 people were actually registered in Dundee, and I think in the last month or so of the registration drive. We registered in 1 week 1,000 people, Stobie for Aye and the Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions and Scottish Unemployed Workers Network. And I said it before, I'll say it again, those people were not registered in order to vote no. And the message that we were getting through, loud and clear for people, was that they were looking towards independence as a way out of the morass of austerity, of zero-hour contracts, and the whole Westminster bubble. And politics is starting to get real now. It's not about petty concerns. It's about the fundamentals of life. It's about the building blocks of life. It's about the politics of the belly. And I think our movement is all the better for concentrating on those fundamental issues. And total credit to the ND Bus for the initiative that they're actually launching on the food banks. And that is something that we would applaud them and give them every aid in order to do. There's a few other things as well. We've mentioned Dundee Against Welfare Sanctions and SUWN rally next week. That rally will be taking place, it'll be starting in outside Boots. That's our Freedom Square to a certain extent. You know, following the meeting that we actually had there last Saturday. And I've made this point before, but in 30 years of political activity, I've never been to a street meeting like that. Never. It's revitalised an old lefty campaigner such as myself to the extent that I did not believe would be possible. You know, we started off with a referendum campaign, and this is quickly developing into a social revolution. That is the truth of the matter. When I say that we are in the early days of the Scottish Revolution, I'm not attempting to try and up the rhetoric or anything like that. That is precisely the position that we are actually in at this moment in time. And where Scotland leads, the rest of the UK will follow, we believe. But where Dundee leads, the rest of Scotland will follow. So I put out the call again in order to actually stage a demonstration around the issue of the Scottish budget. And we will hold out a hand of solidarity and friendship to the SNP if they stand with us against the cuts. You know, when the campaign for independence actually came out for the TV studios and the radio studios, and actually hit the streets, that is when this actually became real. And we do want to keep up the momentum. And we would put out the appeal as Stobie for I, because we're just a small organisation. You know, we don't claim to be anything special. We're a network and a group of individuals. You know, we're not actually just geographically isolated in the Stobie, by the way. I mean, Sarah's actually for Broughty Ferry, you know. But she is a fundamental part of Stobie for I. And we hand out, we put out the hand of solidarity and friendship, anybody that actually wants to become involved in us, because we know that our communities are not going to be able to resist the fundamental attacks that are on their way unless we actually develop this broad bloc alliance and we actually get people under the umbrella of bloc. That is the beginning. The Dundee Yes Broad Left Organising Committee. I put forward again, underline it, get along to the demonstration next Friday. You know, get involved, look at what is actually happening on the Stobie for I, Facebook pages. We see this only as a beginning. It is a bit of outreach work on our part. You know, I actually have the Hoyt view of Dundee in general and the Stobie in particular. That a day out of the Stobie is a day wasted as far as I'm concerned. That goes for Dundee as well. But we have had to actually come into the city centre because we realise that folk aren't as progressive and as civilised and as cultured as we are in the Stobie. There is places like the ferry and the city centre, and this is part of our outreach, you know, taking the word of yes and the idea of a socially just Scotland to the relatively affluent. These were the people who actually voted no, and we've got to attempt to try and pull them back into our camp. So just again, you know, I don't know if I've forgotten anything. Have I forgotten anything, Sarah? Right, well I think it's a bit time for the pub, don't you? And I'd like to actually just thank you again for actually coming along, and also for having the chance to reacquaint ourselves with Brian Cox. It was a real pleasure actually having Brian Cox up in the Stobie the other week there, showing the solidarity. There are people who get their roots like Brian Cox, we wouldn't have the kind of fracture society that we actually do have. Also notice, by the way, that Kevin Bridges is coming to Dundee to do a book signing in W.H. Smith.
I think Stobie for I are actually going to invite him up to actually do a book signing at Brand Books. Brand Books supported the independence struggle in the Stobie, and Kevin Bridges is a good Yes supporter, should be actually backing Yes supporters in small businesses. We'll finish on this. People did criticise us in the wake of the Jim Murphy episode. Said you're too militant, you're too angry. You shouldn't be so angry. What are you angry about? Well, Dundonians are actually starving, that's what we're angry about. Slowly starving. They're not getting the calories that they need. They're suffering from malnutrition. And we see the evidence of that before our eyes every day in the streets. Now, under those circumstances, what we say is this. During the course of this independence campaign, the British establishment were panicking. Absolutely and utter panicking. And people turn to us and say, you didn't want to scare the horses. Of course we want to scare the horses, because look at what happened when we scared the horses. The entire British establishment, collectively, were touching cloth. Absolutely touching cloth. They were panicking. They were absolutely at 6s and 7s. Now remember this. I believe that we were ahead in the polls on the Monday and lost the election, or lost the referendum on the Thursday. The next time around, we will not give them the opportunity to turn things around in such a way. So I say to you now, thank you for coming, and I hope and trust that we will see you again. Thank you very much.